Hello everyone, and welcome to the April 2023 supporter-sponsored Q&A video with me, Tom, otherwise known as TitaniumLegman. If you were not aware, we do this once a month, wherein my patrons and my supporters on YouTube via YouTube memberships are able to ask me one question each month to answer in a Q&A format like this, and then I put it out there for all of you to see. So if you'd like to be able to ask questions in the future, consider joining via my YouTube memberships or via Patreon. Links are in the description. Help me out, support me monetarily, make it so that I'm not quite as beholden to ad revenue, and you get to ask questions and have them answered on camera, which is pretty cool. We have a nice little slate of questions here today. Apologies if I squint a little bit. I'm glasses off because the glare is terrible today, and my eyesight isn't the best. So, starting off with the Incompletionist, his question. If you could switch one adventure-style RPG, Souls series, Zelda, etc., with a tactical or JRPG style, and vice versa, what would they be, and why? And this is an interesting one. This is definitely an interesting one, because I don't have a ton of experience with ARPGs, like action RPG, adventure RPGs, really. Things like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, FromSoft games in general. Yes, absolutely. Zelda less so, which we'll get into actually in one of our future questions. But honestly, even if I did have more experience with the adventure RPG genre, I don't know that I'd really be able to give a more honest answer than saying, like, Elden Ring as something that I'd love to see in the tactical or JRPG style. Like, I'm imagining a Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics, or even XCOM, or something along those lines, style of game done by FromSoft, set in the world of Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, even Sekiro. That would be so interesting. The difficulty of combat that would be brought to the fore, which, tactical RPGs generally already well known for their difficulty of combat. And then having that sort of world building and storytelling that could evolve between battles in a setting like that, that would be super compelling to me. It would have that very dark fantasy, almost post-apocalyptic vibe that I'm 100% a sucker for, with the exact type of gameplay that is my absolute favorite. That would be super cool. I would really, really enjoy that. For the vice versa, for the tactical JRPG style switched over to an adventure style, this might be a little bit of a weird one, and I don't know that everyone will agree with my designation of this as a strategy RPG, but Darkest Dungeon, I think, would be so cool as a world that you got to explore in a more like open world adventure style, like Elden Ring, Zelda, stuff like that. I guess you could even say like things like Genshin Impact, that type of open world combat based RPG system. Darkest Dungeon would be really, really cool. And imagine you had your party of adventurers like you do in Darkest Dungeon. Say you've got a leper, a highwayman, a plague doctor, and a vestal, right? It's one of my preferred party comps. And you go out there into the world. Maybe it would be kind of Genshin Impact-y, where you would have a party that you could swap between the characters, or maybe they'd all be on the field with you. I don't know. There's ways to do that. But then explore, go down into dungeons, find the darkest dungeon, fight bosses, have encounters, activate curios, find items, deal with your character's stress levels, go camping. Like, there's actually... Not saying that Red Hook should ever do this, because that's a project that's way beyond the scale of a smaller company like Red Hook, unless they really expanded, which maybe they could, but that would be so cool. And it would be different from something like, say, Elden Ring, because, well, Elden Ring or any FromSoft game that's a fantasy game, really, has that dark post-apocalyptic sort of vibe to it. The world of Darkest Dungeon versus FromSoft's worlds is much more in your face with the trauma and the degradation of it all, Like, you don't have a stress mechanic in something like, say, Elden Ring. Maybe something like Bloodborne, where you've got the whole insight mechanic, would lean a little bit more into that, and would kind of align more with the ideas of Darkest Dungeon in general. But I don't know, man. I think that could be really cool. And then if you had the ability to actually build different parties still with the different types of playable characters and the different types of classes, that would be awesome. I think that'd be super cool. And I would have to make a case for the fact that Darkest Dungeon does absolutely have strategy RPG elements because you're building up characters, customizing them in the ways that you want, refining their skills for your play style, making tactical decisions in a turn-based environment. I think it definitely fits, even if it's not the sort of top-down map grid-based experience that something like your XCOMs, your Phoenix Points, your Tactics Ogres, your Final Fantasy Tactics bring to the table. But I think that'd be super cool. So that's my answer. Thank you for the questioning, Completionist. Moving on, we have IR Fine, who actually, a little bit of a special case. I left out his wildcard question from the last video. Completely slipped my mind. He specifically said he always has a wildcard question that he throws me, allowing me to answer a question of my choosing. And I just forgot it. I just forgot it. So I owe him two. So we're going to be doing two wildcards today. But that's fine, because I'm actually going to kind of be tying those back into the previous question a little bit. And it'll be a little bit of a duo question. So the first question, since it is Zelda time with Tears of the Kingdom on the horizon, what is your favorite Legend of Zelda game that you have ever played? This is me asking me. And the answer that I give me is, well, I've only ever played one, really. I've started a couple, but I've only ever played one through to completion, and that's A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. It's one of the first-ish games I played growing up. I watched my dad play it a lot when I was a kid, and then I played it myself as a kid, never quite finished it. Then years later, went back to it on our old Super Nintendo and played it through from start to finish, and I adore that game. It's very strange because I'm otherwise not really a huge Legend of Zelda fan. I don't have anything against it. We'll kind of get into that in a second, but it's just not something that's been a major part of my gaming experience or my life growing up. But Link to the Past still holds a special place in my heart as part of my gaming repertoire, despite that. And that speaks to the power of Legend of Zelda games, I feel like. So I love A Link to the Past. It captures so much about that feeling of adventure that Zelda games are known for. But it's remarkable because it was on the Super Nintendo. Like, I was just talking about this with Jane recently. We were looking at footage of A Link to the Past in a Zelda video she was watching. And it's amazing that that game is a Super Nintendo game. Because you look at it now, you could see it coming out now as a modern indie title. And it feels like it has all of the design sense and understanding from a game design standpoint, not game design standpoint, that the last, God, how many years has it been since Link to the Past came out? 20, 30 years of development in the gaming space has given indie titles the ability to do, or even AAA titles. And yet it came out so far before all of those more modern games. It's mind-blowing. It's insane. Like, that game stands up to the test of time in a way that so many games don't. And there's definitely other Super Nintendo games that can be said to do the same. Chrono Trigger comes to mind. But it just blows me away. It blows me away. And I have such a nostalgic attachment to that world and those characters and the music that even when they show up in other Zelda games, I immediately get that tingle down my spine, that recollection, that nostalgia. It's super cool. So, yes, as the only game that I've ever completed in the Legend of Zelda series, I have to give it to A Link to the Past. But I don't think that's really a designation that people who've played it would disagree with anyway, because it's definitely high up there on the quality bar of Zelda games, I would say. Now, for the second wildcard question, we're going to stick with the Legend of Zelda theme, but we're going to go and ask for the future. Tom, are you going to play Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? This is a question that I've been getting a lot the last few days. Unsurprisingly, there's a ton of hype surrounding Tears of the Kingdom. And the answer is, yeah. Yeah, I think I am. And I think I'm going to put it on the channel. I can't guarantee that it'll be a full playthrough because those games are obviously massive. And it's out pretty soon. And there's a lot of other games coming out that I also want to play. And I don't know how much interest there will be in me playing it when there's so many people that are going to be playing it. And there's so many like dedicated Zelda channels that people go to for their Zelda content. I don't know if we'll draw an audience. And with a game like that that's so big and so immersive, I would like to be able to play it for myself in my own time if there's not a big demand for it, you know? It's kind of the awkward thing of doing games on the channel is you have to set aside so much time for it, and you can't really just sit and enjoy it for yourself because of that. Because how are you supposed to play it when you're also playing it on stream or in videos or something So like all the times they'd be like, oh, I'm not really doing anything. I could sit down and play Tears of the Kingdom. Oh, but I don't really have time to stream it. So like, I really shouldn't, you know? But if there's a big demand for it and people are across the channel are enjoying it, maybe new people are coming in, then yeah, absolutely, I'll do it because it's good for the channel. It's fun playing games with you guys. So, but we're definitely going to give it a shot at the very least because, I mean, Jane's getting the game regardless. She's obviously playing the game. She's a huge Legend of Zelda fan. So we're going to have the game. I may as well check it out. And it'll be the first time that I've really had the opportunity to actually get into a Zelda game when it's current. There's a reason that I've only ever played A Link to the Past, and that's because we had it when I was a kid growing up. But after that point, we didn't have a Nintendo console for generations of those systems. We had a Super Nintendo, and then I've had like Game Boys and stuff, but those for a long time were like Pokemon machines and Fire Emblem machines, and that was about it. Advance Wars, a couple other things. But never Zelda. And we didn't have an N64 because we got a PlayStation. We didn't have a GameCube because we got a PlayStation 2. For a long time, didn't have a Wii because we had a PS3 and an Xbox 360. We only got a Wii way later into its life cycle. And then again, we never had a Wii U. And the Switch is one of the first Nintendo consoles that I've had that wasn't a family console. So it's kind of been a weird exposure to Nintendo titles for me in terms of things like Legend of Zelda that weren't as often, or at least didn't have main series titles on handheld. So with Tears of the Kingdom, I'd like to try and turn that around because I am very interested in Breath of the Wild. And this is something I'm working on a video that I want to talk about as its own topic of like Breath of the Wild and my experience with it and everything since I haven't really played it till recently. Sorry, got distracted by a phone call. I want to talk about Breath of the Wild and my exposure to it and the way I've kind of experienced the game since I haven't played a bunch of it for myself until recently. We'll talk about that in a later video. But since Tears of the Kingdom is coming out, it's going to be fresh. It looks really cool. I've always liked what I've seen of Breath of the Wild. I'd like to experience it with everyone if I can. So yes, we'll absolutely be playing Tears of the Kingdom on launch day and hopefully long after that as well. We'll see. Who knows? Depends on what the response is, but I'll definitely be doing that. So thank you for the 2 wildcard questions. Fine. Very much appreciate it. Sorry I missed it last month. I will absolutely do my best to not miss it again. Moving on to Canadia asks, what game have you replayed all the way through the most amount of times? This is an interesting one because my first inclination was going to be Final Fantasy Tactics because, of course, it's my favorite game of all time and I have played it a bunch. But FFT is a long game. And there's plenty of times where I've started it and gotten a chunk of the way through it, partially because I was motivated by trying a new build, trying a new setup of classes and characters, or going for different secrets, whatever, and then did that thing and got distracted doing other stuff. I've played the game through at least 5 times to completion. I've played the game in some form or fashion probably 20 or 30 times. But when I think about it, for games that I've actually played through to completion more, I think it's either the original generation of Pokemon games or Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. I think. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance is also pretty high up there, though. But I think it's got to be Sacred Stones, just because I've had it for longer, and it was the only Fire Emblem game I had for a long time. So we're going to go with Sacred Stones. Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones, if you were not aware, is my favorite Fire Emblem game. It's the one that I started with. It's got a special place in my heart for introducing me to the series and expanding my view of strategy RPGs as a genre, because for a long time, Final Fantasy Tactics was the only game I knew of in that genre when I was a kid. But the Sacred Stones has spent so much time in my mind and in my heart and in my hands playing it on my Game Boy. I mean, I've probably finished that game at least 8 or 9 times. Once on the channel, and then God only knows how many times over the years. When I had more time on my hands, I would go through and play probably 3 or 4 Fire Emblem games a year and replay them in rapid order. That's why I was thinking like Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn would probably be up there as well. Because in terms of easily digestible, fun, yet challenging games, especially in the Fire Emblem series, those three, Sacred Stones and the Tellius games, Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn, are definitely up there for me. Radiant Dawn is a little long, but I like replaying it alongside Path of Radiance since the two go together, and I enjoy being able to transfer my data over from Path of Radiance to Radiant Dawn to influence my units. But I still think Sacred Stones takes the cake. It's just the perfect game for me. It's not super long, but it's long enough that you can really sink your teeth into it. It's got 2 routes, so you can alternate back and forth depending on which route you feel like playing, Erica's or Frames. It's not the hardest Fire Emblem game around. It's the simpler formula of the handheld game, so you don't have a bunch of skills that you're working around and everything, compared to something like, say, Awakening or Fates or whatever. And it's just good, straightforward fun. The GBA animations are great. It's got absolutely the best graphics and music, and I would say some of the best writing of the GBA era of Fire Emblem games. It just has so much going for it. So I've replayed that a lot, and I will probably play it again soon because, again, it just speaks to me, and it's a very comfortable game to come back to. So thank you for the question, Canadian. Moving on, we have Caffeine System. Riffing on Canadia's question a little, you can see she followed his question up here. Are you the type of person to get fixated on a song or album and just loop it for hours? If so, which ones have you done that with? And if not, share a song you've been enjoying lately. I am that type of person. I get stuck, I guess. Fixated would be another way of saying it. On songs and albums and artists a lot. There's one that I've actually been listening to a lot. I first found it and listened to it over and over maybe a month ago now. The album is by Mitzi's and is called Void Reckon. It's on YouTube and presumably, things like SoundCloud and stuff like that. Bandcamp maybe? Is Bandcamp still a thing? I don't know. But Mitzi's is the artist behind all of the music for Helltaker, which, if you know Helltaker, has some really, really catchy music. And Mitzi's is a full electronica album by them, just, I think, for their own sake to make it, not like for a specific project or anything like that. And it's good, man. I love some good electronica. Lyricless, just beats and tones and sounds and rhythm, and man, is it good. I'll have a link to it in the description for people who want to check it out. But it's just good. It's a good 34 minutes of kicking music. And I've listened to it probably 20, 30 times easily at this point. I'm probably underselling it. It's probably been more than that, honestly. And I don't get tired of it. I enjoy every single track on the album, and it's just fun. It's energetic. It's why I use it for my workout. Typically they're longer than 34 minutes between cardio and whatnot, but for at least part of my workout, it's what's fueling me. It's really, really good. So in terms of songs, I will get stuck on songs as well for a while. It happened to me a lot with Ghost as I was discovering more of their discography and everything. Little Sunshine is one of theirs that I got stuck on. I'll have a link to that in the description as well. I listened to that a lot. Beyond that, I've got a lot of favorites. I'm a huge Linkin Park fan. Linkin Park is my favorite band of all time. Their newer stuff more than their older stuff, which I know kind of runs counter to a lot of people's experience with Linkin Park, but I love their new stuff. I say new, it's probably like 15, 20 years old now, but anyway. So I'll listen to their stuff over and over and over when I get in the mood for it. I definitely don't get sick of songs in the way that a lot of people do. So, thank you for the question, Caffeine. Light B asks, continuing the music theme, what is your preferred musical style? Well-written lyricism, interesting riffs, preferred genre, etc. We kind of already touched on that a little bit, but I'm a big electronica fan. I like new retro waves, heavy synthy stuff a lot. If you're familiar with artists like Carpenter Brut, Perturbator, Dance with the Dead, stuff like that, that's my jam. That is 100% my jam. And some of those tracks, some of those artists do have lyrics, but a lot of them are lyricless, which I like because I like having music in the background while I'm working on other stuff, while I'm scripting videos, while I'm playing games, while I'm working out. And I find sometimes that having lyrics in music in the background when I'm doing stuff like that is very distracting. But having just the music itself, very nice accompaniment. I'm also a big heavy rock, metal, alternative rock kind of guy. Big fan of that type of stuff. Again, I mentioned Linkin Park, which has kind of some elements of a lot of that stuff in it. Ghost some people would argue, and listen, I'm not a huge music buff, all right? So I'm not looking to start any music debates here. I know some people say Ghost is metal. Some people say Ghost isn't metal. I don't know. I've just always thought of them as metal, so that's what I'm going to go with. Don't at me. I do not get involved in music debates like that. I'm not qualified for it, and I'm not interested in getting into it. But yeah, stuff like that. Chef's kiss. Love it. I'm not really a big pop kind of guy. Not really a big... Really, there's a lot of genres of music that I'm not really super into. I guess it's weirder stuff that I enjoy. Not to be like esoteric or, oh, look at me, I like weird music. It's just the stuff that I've always been most attracted to. I didn't listen to a lot of music when I was a kid because I never really liked the stuff that was on the radio. So it made my radio shows very interesting back in the day when I had my own radio show in college. But people always seem to enjoy it. I always introduce people to new stuff, so who knows. But yeah, I'd say electronica, new retro wave, dark, heavy, synthy stuff is typically my go-to. So thank you for the question, Light. And finally, coming off of the music train, we have Shanur Islam, who asks, do you plan to cover other turn-based strategy games? Absolutely. No question about that. Older members of my community, people who've been around longer, before we really hit our stride with turn-based strategy games, I've been talking about how they'd like to see a return to a greater variety of content, and I'm absolutely down for that. I want to get back to doing Metroidvanias. I've never really played Castlevania games, so playing those on the channel would be cool. Metroid Prime 2, 3, all that type of stuff. Getting back to things like Cult of the Lamb, checking out other requests, suggestions by the community, like Iconoclasts, Frog Fractions, all that type of stuff I want to get back to. But turn-based strategy games are my bread and butter. Not just in terms of the channel, but in terms of what I personally enjoy the most. I like variety, but turn-based, that's where I'm most comfortable and it's what I like the most. So there's absolutely going to be coverage of those types of games on the channel. I don't know if I'll go back to Front Mission Remake 1. That's something I've seen a few people request, but it's such a simple game that there's not a lot of commentary to have about it, and there's not much in the way of like guides or explanation that I can see in it either. It's very straightforward, but from everything I've heard, Front Mission Remake 2, which is coming out, should be a lot more involved because Front Mission 2 itself was a lot more involved. It was a much more expanded upon version of Front Mission 1. So we'll probably cover that when it comes out. There's another one that I covered on the channel recently. Come on, brain. Don't do me like this. Kriegsfront Tactics. There we go. That one's super interesting looking. Very obviously Front Mission inspired, but with inspirations from other entries in the genre. Definitely going to be checking that out. I'd like to do more Fire Emblem in terms of like the older games. Go back to doing something like Fire Emblem Fridays with Jane, or just not by myself, play some of the older games, put them on the channel. Whenever we eventually get the Final Fantasy Tactics remake that I'm sure is coming, definitely going to be doing that, obviously, on the channel. And then other stuff as well. Like I'm still planning on doing my Phoenix Point wrap-up stream to kind of cap off the Let's Play from years ago. If new XCOM stuff comes out, definitely want to check that out. Other stuff in the indie scene. There's a big like DLC patch coming out for Symphony of War, the Nephilim Saga, which is a game I never got around to playing on the channel, even though I intended to, but I just devoured it in like 3 nights, because I loved it that much. Maybe cover that on the channel. There's a ton of strategy stuff I want to do, for sure. And of course, I'm always open to suggestions. Don't want to miss anything, any, diamonds in the rough or needles in haystacks that might slip past my view. So let me know if there are other ones that you guys would like to see as well. But yes, no worries there, Shanur. Definitely going to be more tactics stuff on the horizon. But that said, guys, that is our slate of questions for this video. So thank you for your submissions. Again, if you would like to be able to submit questions in the future, you can join my Patreon or via my YouTube memberships, and I'll post threads in my Discord, in my YouTube community section for members only, and on Patreon for you to post your questions too. So wherever you join, wherever you are, you'll be able to see that there's a thread active, and you'll be able to put your question in for next month. Sorry this one's coming out a little bit late. Schedule's been super hectic. It's just been a whole lot of chaos, honestly. But I'm glad that I was able to get it out here for you, and I hope that you guys enjoyed, because these are always fun to do. So, that said, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as TitaniumLegman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.